Hi, welcome to this course on graph theory. We are going to pursue this subject with the intention of trying to use this theory to solve problems in mathematical Olympiads. So, first, let's just understand what the subject is all about. So, what is graph theory? The mathematical study of connections and interactions between discrete objects. That is called graph theory. We will get right down to examples pretty soon, but let's just explore the definition a little more. It talks about the relationships between collections of distinct objects, and that those relationships can basically give us information about the overall network in which the objects are residing. So basically, the objects could be people, the network could be the internet, and connections between people can tell us information about the entire network, right? Sometimes lack of connections can can give us information. So we are going to mathematically study the interactions and connections between groups of objects, right? So that is graph theory. So before we begin and go into some typical examples, let's just go through some of the basic concepts that we'll need to just get started in the subject. Okay. So the first idea is, what is a graph? A graph is basically a triplet. A graph is a triplet like V, E, and phi, where V and E are called the vertex set and the edge set, respectively. Vertex set and edge set, respectively. V is always non-empty. Basically, it always has to have some element. So there has to be at least one vertex for it to be called a graph, right? Now, what is phi? Phi is a function between V cross V and E. So what is V cross V? V cross V is the ordered pair of vertices, right? So whenever you do A cross B, where A and B are two sets, you are saying it's a collection of ordered pairs such that A belongs to A and small b belongs to B. Collection of such ordered pairs is called A cross V, right? So V cross V is basically vertices like this, V1, V2, such that V1 belongs to V and V2 belongs to V, right? And there can be many such pairs of vertices. So what is phi now? Phi is a function from V cross V to E. So edge set is basically having a set of edges, and from each pair of vertices is linked to one particular edge, right? So what we have, phi function, therefore phi function tells us between these vertices, let's say Vi and Vj, there is a particular edge. It's called Ei, let's say. So phi of I will be 1 if Ei is the edge between Vi, Vj, and phi of I will be 0 if there is no edge between Vi, Vj. Between Vi, Vj. This phi is basically called the incidence function. Right now, if you are feeling like this definition is very technical, don't worry, we'll see examples where it will become clearer, right? For now, just know that a graph is a collection of some vertices and they are connected by some edges, right? Let's say these are the connections. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My vertex set will be basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My edge set will be, let's label this edges as A, B, and C. Edge set is simply A, B, C. And what is my phi? phi is a function such that it tells us that phi of, for example, 1 2, phi 1 2 is equal to 1, phi 2 3 is equal to 1, phi 4 5 is also equal to 1. However, phi 1 3 is equal to 0, phi 1 4 is equal to 0, phi 2 5 is equal to 0, phi 3 5 is equal to 0, and so on. You get the idea. 1 5 is also 0, phi 1 5. So what is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that there is an edge connecting vertices 1 and 2, and that edge is called actually A, right? And therefore that we denote that by 1. 1 is the value of phi 1 2. So phi is an incidence function. Incidence function which just tells us whether there is an edge connecting two vertices or not. So see, 1 2 is 1, 2 3 is 1 because there is an edge B between 2 and 3. Similarly, 4 5 is 1 because C edge is connecting vertices 4 and 5. However, any other combinations of vertices gives 0 in the phi function because there are no edges connecting these vertices, right? We'll get to the details of this incidence function later, but for now just remember that this collection of vertices and edges is called a graph, right? Now let's move on to the second idea here. Okay, so when can we say that two graphs are identical? Two graphs are identical, or technically it is called isomorphic. Two graphs are identical or isomorphic if there is a bijection. There is a bijection. What is a bijection? Bijection is a 1 1 onto function. 1 1 onto function. If you have any issue with understanding the word bijection, you should go to the combinatorics like videos that have just started, and there is a section on bijective proofs where I talk about what a bijection is. So that will help you understand that. So let's get back to this. So two graphs are identical if there is a bijection from the vertices of a graph G to the vertices of graph G dash such that the number of edges joining Vi and Vj, number of edges joining Vi and Vj, which is in graph G, is equal to the number of vertices, number of edges joining Vi dash and Vj dash, which are in G dash. Basically, what does all this mean? It means that if I have a graph here, right? If I have a graph like this, suppose this is my 1 2 3, these are my vertices, and another graph here like this is A, B, and C, and this is also joined like this. Now what I can say is that there is a bijection from this graph to this graph. What is a bijection? It's a 1 1 mapping, 1 1 onto mapping. So every vertex of G graph can be linked to another vertex of G dash graph. So 1 is linked to C, 2 is linked to A, and 3 is linked to B here. And at the same time, between any two vertices of G graph, there is, say, one edge here. And between the same two vertices on the G dash graph, there should be another one edge. So the number of edges joining two vertices in G graph should be equal to number of edges joining the corresponding two vertices in the G dash graph, right? and all the vertices are linked by 1 1 mapping, then it is an isomorphic or identical graph. Then you can say that G is similar to G dash. So it's technically one and the same graph, right? Okay. I hope you understood that. Let's move on to the third idea. A graph G dash, which is V dash comma E dash, let's say, is a subgraph of G, which is VE, if and only if V dash is a subset of V and E dash is a subset of E. Basically, it says that if you have a normal graph G which has vertex set V and edge set E, then a new graph G dash can be called a subgraph of G if and only if the vertex set and the edge set of the new graph are both subsets of the corresponding vertex sets and edge sets of the old graph, right? So that is a fairly straightforward definition. Then now some terminology that will be useful for us. If there is an edge, joining Vi and Vj, then Vi and Vj are said to be adjacent. Vj are adjacent vertices. Very straightforward terminology. Two vertices are called adjacent if there is an edge that connects them, right? Then if a vertex V is at the end of an edge E, right? Then we say V is incident to E. V is incident to E. Again, similar terminology. So as long as one vertex V is at the end of an edge E, we say that V is incident to that edge E. Okay. Then we call an edge a loop. We call an edge a loop if there is an edge, if it joins a vertex to itself. If it joins a vertex to itself. So basically, if you have a graph like this, there are some edges and one edge is weird like this, right? So this is A, B, C. Now this edge is called a loop because it is joining vertex C to itself. This is a regular simple edge, right, between A and B. So that is also pretty straightforward definition. Now, seventh point here is two or more edges with the same pair of ends. Are called parallel edges. So basically, if you have a graph like this is A, B, C, and you have another edge like this, right? This is edge 1, this is edge 2, and one edge like this, edge 3, right? Here, E1 and E2 are parallel edges because they are joining the same two vertices A and B, right? So that makes sense. A graph is called a simple graph. A graph is called a simple graph if there are no loops or parallel edges. No loops or parallel edges. So you want to ensure, if you want to have a simple graph, you don't have any loops in it or no parallel edges as well. So this is not permitted and these parallel edges are not permitted to be called a simple graph, right? Now, next idea is a complete graph. What is a complete graph? A graph G such that any two vertices are adjacent. Any two vertices are adjacent is called a complete graph. Is called a complete graph. So let's look at some examples of complete graphs. So if you take a triangular graph like this, right? Notice that any two vertices here are adjacent because there is a link between the vertices A and B, B and C, and C and A, right? So all of these are adjacent vertices. So this is a complete graph of order 3. This is called K3. So all complete graphs are written by a symbol like this, where K stands for the complete graph, N stands for number of vertices. For number of vertices, right? So if I want to draw K4, for example, I will draw a square. But that is not going to be sufficient because I also have to connect these two, and I have to connect these two. So this is a complete graph of size 4 because any two vertices you can see they are now connected. Now you can easily deduce that if you have Kn, right? Basically there are n vertices. How many edges should be there? How many edges should be there in Kn? Basically a complete graph with n vertices. So since any two can be connected by an edge, you should have nc2 edges, right? So that will be n into n minus 1 by 2. These many edges will be there in a Kn graph, right? Okay. So the last theory point that I want to mention in this introductory video is point number 10, which is a graph is called finite. A graph is finite if both the number of vertices, which is the modulus of the V set, and the number of edges, which is mod of E, are finite. So the number of vertices in a graph is often called order of a graph. Order of G is equal to basically mod V. And number of edges of a graph is often called size of a graph. Size of a graph G is basically mod E. So a graph is called finite if both order and size are finite, right? So far what we have seen is we have understood what a graph is, and we have seen some basic terminology, right? Some basic principles of just names of, and definitions of what terms are graph theory, right? So now what we'll do is look at a couple of examples which will help us understand how these principles are going to be applied. And we'll just end with two examples and we'll continue with new concepts in the next video. Let's look at the first example. So this is the question. There are 605 people in a party. There are 605 people in a party. Suppose that each of them shakes hand with at least one person. Suppose that each of them shakes hands with at least one person. Prove that there must be someone. Prove that there must be someone Who shakes hands with at least two people? Who shakes hands with at least two people, right? So very straightforward question, but what we will do is convert this to a graph theory problem so that we can easily analyze it. Okay, so the first step in that is to model the question as a graph theory question. How do we do that? Let's think about the 605 people as 605 vertices. 605 vertices of a graph. So the vertices will be labeled V1, V2 till V605, right? These are vertices of a graph. And let's make the rule that there is an edge. There is an edge between Vi and Vj. Vi and Vj. If Vi and Vj, those people shake hands. If they shake hands, there is an edge between them, right? Okay. So now we know one thing, that each of them shakes hand with at least one person. So every vertex has to have one edge at least, right? Correct? Okay. We have to prove that there must be someone who shakes hand with at least two people, right? So we have to prove that there is one vertex in this set of V1 to V605 where one of them at least has two edges coming out from it, right? So it has shaken hands with two people. That person has shaken hands with two people. That is what we have to prove. So what we do is assume by contradiction, assume the opposite. Assume that there is no such person. There is no such PI who shakes hand with two people or more, right? Who shakes hands with two or more people. So what does that mean? That means that everyone has shook hands with only one person, right? Because two or more is not allowed, so everyone must shake hands with only one person, right? So what does that mean? That means that situation is somewhat like this. Each of these vertices have one link to some other vertex, something like that, right? There cannot be two. This is not possible now, right? Okay. So suppose the graph has R edges. Now, whatever this graph will be, it will have some number of edges. Let the number of edges be R, right? If there are R edges, then what must be true? Number of vertices must be 2R, right? Number of vertices must be twice of R, because each edge has two people at the end, right? You have to have two people to shake hands, right? So each edge will be connected to two vertices at the end. And since everyone shook hands with only one person, it will always be a situation like this, right? You cannot have a situation like this where one person is shaking hands with two, right? Then the counting will not be 2R. So this is not allowed. So the number of vertices must be 2R, right? But 2R is even, right? 2R is even, and we have 605 vertices actually. 605 is odd. So we have reached a contradiction. We have, from assuming that there are no such people who shook hands with two or more persons, we realize that the number of possible vertices is coming out to be 2R. However, the actual number of vertices is 605, which is odd, right? So therefore, this is a contradiction. So that proves our statement that there must be someone who has shaken hands with at least two people, right? Step back and pause the video for a few moments if you're not understanding the logic. Just Go through it again, you will get it. It's not very difficult. We are saying that if there is no such VI who shakes hands with two or more people, then that means that everyone has shook hands with one person. So if the edges were R, then at the end of the edges, the vertices will be double of that, right? 2R. The total number of vertices will be 2R. Correct? You cannot have someone isolated hanging around here without shaking hands with anyone, because the question itself says that each of them shakes hand with at least one person, and it cannot be more than two by our assumption. So it has to be everyone shakes hand with one person. So it has to be 2R, which is a contradiction to the 605 given in the problem, right? So this proves that there must be someone who has shook hands with more than one person, right? Let's look at another problem. This is little more difficult. This is from US AMO 1978. Okay, so the question is, nine mathematicians meet at a conference, Now, for any three people, at least two of them can speak in the same language. There is also a restriction that if each mathematician can speak at most three languages, then what we have to prove, that at least three mathematicians can speak in the same language. So let's try to understand what the problem is saying. So there are 9 mathematicians at a conference, okay? Now, if you take any three of them, there will be at least two of whom who can speak to each other in some same language, okay? So any group of three, if you take out of those 9, two of them will be able to converse with each other because they know the same language, right? That is one condition. The second condition is the maximum number of languages that one mathematician can speak is 3. So for example, I can speak in Hindi, English, and Bengali, let's say, right? So that is the maximum number of languages that I can speak. Similarly, every mathematician has an upper limit of 3 languages. What you have to prove is that there are at least 3 mathematicians in the group of 9 who know the same language, right? And so therefore they can speak to each other in the same language. So again, what we will do is convert this to a graph theory problem. Let's say the mathematicians are denoted by vertices v1 to v9, right? These are mathematicians. Now we say if two mathematicians, if two of them can talk in the ith language, then there is an edge. Joining them and having color I. So what do we mean here? So we have v1 to v9 as 9 vertices of which represent mathematicians, and we are saying that if two of the mathematicians can talk, if any two of them can talk, you will connect those two with a line and we'll color that with ith colors, right? So V1, V2, V3, V4. Suppose I'm just drawing four of them right now. Suppose V1 and V4 can talk in English, then this will be some E color, right? And V2 and V3 could talk in French, then this will be some F color, right? So if these two can talk in some language, then you will join them with a link, with an edge, and color that edge with some label, right? So that is the idea here. Okay, so what we now know from the conditions of the problem is that every three vertices, any three vertices you choose will have at least one edge, have at least one edge joining them. Any three vertices that you select will have one edge at least joining two of them, right? And the second condition is that edges which are incident to a vertex, edges incident to a vertex, basically all the edges coming out from one vertex are colored in at most three colors, colored in at most three different colors, because each color represents each language, right? So one vertex means one mathematician, and if he's say able to talk to five different mathematicians, he can talk to them in at most three languages, right? Like there have to be repetitions of languages because he cannot have five new languages. There is an upper limit on number of languages or number of colors in which the edges can be marked, right? What we have to prove, what we have to prove is there are three vertices, there are three vertices in the graph, any two of which are which form a monochromatic triangle. What does the meaning of that? Monochromatic triangle. Basically, we have to prove that between V1 to V9, at least there are some three which form a triangle like this, where all three are of the same color. Let's say English, English, English. Then these three can speak the same language, right? We have to get a situation like this. We have to prove that there will be a monochromatic triangle, one color triangle in this group of 9 mathematicians, right? So let's get down to it. I'll do it on the next screen. So one fact that we'll be using is that if edges Vi and Vj and Vi and Vk have the ith color, then Vj, Vk will also have the ith color, will have an edge and ith color. That is a very straightforward thing to say actually, because so suppose there is an edge Vi, Vj and it is colored with I. That means Vi and Vj both can speak in the language I, right? Similarly, Vi and Vk also can speak in the language I. That means that Vj and Vk both understand the language I. So therefore, there must be an edge joining them because they can also talk in I then. So what we are saying is if Vi to Vk has a color I and Vi to Vj has a color I, then this can be linked and this will also have color I. And therefore, you'll get a monochromatic triangle in that case, right? So this is an obvious fact. I've just stated it here for your benefit, but we'll now get to the proof. So we'll do the proof in two cases. We'll think about the vertex V1. So consider vertex V1. Now there are two cases. Case one, V1 is adjacent to all of V2, V3, V4 till V9. Let's say V1 is adjacent to all of these V2, V3, V4, V9, right? In that case, now we can say that by the pigeonhole principle, there are at least two edges from V1 to V2 to V9, right? Which are colored by the same color, which are colored with the same color. Now, if you don't understand this statement, let me just explain what is pigeonhole principle. So if there are n pigeons and n minus 1 holes, then one hole has to have two pigeons, right? If you try to fit n pigeons into n minus 1 holes, then one of the holes will have two pigeons, right? So similarly here, think of this, think of the 8 vertices here as the pigeons, right? So you have 8 vertices or 8 pigeons, vertices, which have to be fit into 3 colors, right? V1 can know at max 3 languages, right? And if V1 is adjacent to 8 people, then obviously some vertices will be marked by edges having the same color, right? There are 3 holes or colors. So what I'm saying is V1 is here, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, let's say V8 and V9, right? Since V1 is linked to all of them, you have to connect all of these edges, right? You have to connect all of these edges, but how many colors do you have? You have only 3 colors to choose from. So you can mark it I, J, K, but after that you have to repeat some colors now, because he knows V1 knows only IJK languages, right? So I has to come back again. Maybe all of them maybe will be I, or maybe some will be J again or K again, right? So basically the point is that you will have to have at least two edges here, like edge this one and this one, which will have the same color, right? So let's say V2 and V3 are colored with the same, our edges are connected with the same color edges, with the same color edges. Then we know that V1, V2 has color I, V1, V3 has color I, therefore V2, V3 has color I by the fact that I had mentioned before. Therefore, V1, V2, V3 is a monochromatic triangle. V1, V2, V3, all of them have color I, right? It's a monochromatic triangle. And we have proved that there are at least 3 people who can talk to each other in the same language, right? Here the language would be the I language, right? So this is case 1. So in case 1, we can easily see that there is definitely going to be a monochromatic triangle, or 3 people being able to talk to each other in the same language, right? Now let's look at case 2. Case 1 was when V1 was adjacent to all of these vertices. What is case 2? Case 2 I can write as V1 is non-adjacent, to at least one of V2, V3 till V9. So in the previous case, I said it is adjacent to everyone. Now I'm saying it is non-adjacent. So it is not connected to at least one out of V2 to V9, right? So without any loss of generality, let's suppose that V1 is non-adjacent to V2. Non-adjacent to V2, right? Now, what is my claim? My claim is for any three vertices, there is at least one edge. There is at least one edge joining them. So there are at least 7 edges. There are at least 7 edges from V3, V4, V9 to either V1 or V2. So let's try to understand this. This is not immediately clear. So think about it. V1 is here, V2 is here, and V1 and V2 are not connected to each other because we have assumed that V1 is non-adjacent to V2. Let's say V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, and V9. These are the other vertices. V1 is connected to all of them. V1 is connected to all of them, right? Because we said that V1, we are supposed only it is non-adjacent to one of them right now, which was V2. So we have connections like this from here, right? Correct. So those are there. Now that already makes 7, actually 7 edges. Even if that was not the case, what I can say is if I have V1 or V2, if I have a situation like this, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, V9, and let's say V1 and V2. What we don't know is, what we know for sure is that V1 and V2 are not connected. But now from the problem itself, we know that if we take any three of these, right, there must be one edge between them, right? So let's say there has to be this one edge like this, right, between them. It could also be V4, V1. Similarly, if I take these two, these three, there has to be one edge between them, right? Similarly, V4, V5, and V1, if I take, there has to be one edge between them, right? So you can take groups like this and you can convince yourself that there will be at least 7 edges between this set and either V1 or V2. Which are the 7 edges that I can build up here? Say V1 and V3 are connected, V1, V5 are connected, V2, V6 are connected. Now you can even take V4, V5 we have already done. Okay, V6, V7 and V2 we have already done. V6, V7 and V1. So V7 must be connected to V1. Then V7, V8, V2. So V8 could be connected to V2. V9, V8 and V2 we have already covered. P9, V8, V1. So V1 must be connected to V9. Why am I connecting one edge? Because in the problem in the beginning itself, it was said that out of any 3 edges, there has to be one edge. Out of any 3 vertices, there has to be one edge connecting them. So I'm just picking any 3 vertices here and I'm saying one edge must be there. So I'm drawing one edge like this. Similarly, one edge here, right? And the only thing I know is that V1 and V2 are not connected and V1 is now non-adjacent to at least one out of this, right? That was my case 2, right? So you can convince yourself that there will be at least 7 edges from 3 to 9 to either V1 or V2. It could even be just like this. V1 is connected to all of them, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, V9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And V2 is isolated here, right? This is also possible. V1 is connected to all of them and V2 is isolated. But for our purposes, we'll take the more general case. The general case that I'm taking is, let's say V1 is connected to V3, V5, V7, and V9. And let's say V2 is connected to V4, V6, and V8, right? So these are the 7 edges in my general case. Like the labels are not important here. What is important is there are 7 vertices, right? 7 edges. Okay. So by pigeonhole principle again, by pigeonhole principle, at least 4 vertices, are connected to V1 and or V2, to either V1 or V2. So since the total number of edges had to be 7 and there are 2 vertices that we are connecting them to, so one of them has to be connected with 4 and one of them has to be connected with 3, right? Because 7 pigeons, which are the vertices 3 to 9, and 2 holes, which are V1 and V2. So if you have 7 pigeons and 2 holes, then 4 of them must go to one and 3 of them must go to the other, right? So 4 vertices are connected to either V1 or V2. Let's say in our specific example, we have, let's say V1 is connected to 4, which are V3, V5, V7, and V9, right? And V2 is connected to 3, right? Now, again applying pigeonhole, pigeonhole principle here. We say there are 4 connected to V1, but V1 knows only 3 languages, so there are only 3 colors. So there are 4 edges and 3 colors. So that means 2 edges must have the same color. 2 edges must have the same color, right? If 2 edges have the same color, let's call them, without any loss of generality, let's call V1 V3 edge and V1 V5 edge as having color I, right? So now it is clear from here and from the fact that I had mentioned before we started the proof that V1, V3, V5 will form a monochromatic triangle of color I, right? Because both V1 and V3 know the language I, V1 and V5 know the language I, so 3 and 5 can also not talk, right, in language I. So therefore, what we have proved that even in case 2, when V1 was not adjacent to all of them, and it was non-adjacent to at least one, which is V2, even then what we get is that we will get a monochromatic triangle. So we had 2 cases. Case 1 was V1 was adjacent to all of them, and case 2 when it was non-adjacent to some of them. So in both the cases, we have proved that there are at least 3 vertices which will be connected by edges having the same color, right? So that is the presence of a monochromatic triangle has been established, right? So that convinces us that there must be at least 3 mathematicians who can speak to each other in the same language. So that concludes the proof. I would like you guys to go through the proof once more, see the logic of how we modeled the problem first into a graph theory question, and then how we are applying pigeonhole principle to solve it, right? We will see more applications of graph theory in the coming videos. Stay tuned. We'll start off the next video with talking about the degree of a vertex, and we'll start to build some more rigorous approaches to handle problems in graph theory. So I hope you guys are excited, and I'll be bringing to you more such videos shortly. See you next time.